Hey everyone, welcome back. Get ready because today we're doing a deep dive on a topic that always sparks some interesting conversations, to say the least. The evolutionary psychology of women.
Hmm, interesting.
We're going to be looking at a mind of her own, and we're going to be uncovering how evolution has shaped how women think, how they behave, really going beyond all those stereotypes and assumptions, right?
Right.
To uncover, like, what the science actually says.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area of study.
It really is.
And this book does such a good job, I think, of challenging that blank slate idea,
Right. Yeah.
that we're just products of our upbringing.
Right, like we're born with these empty minds just waiting to be, uh, you know, molded by society. But this book is like, hold on a second. We're going to dive headfirst into this whole nature versus nurture debate. And what surprised me was how much evidence there is for a biological underpinning to some behaviors we often just chalk up to socialization.
Yeah, and I think what's important to remember about evolutionary psychology is it's not saying it's all L genes.
Right.
It's really about the interplay, right? So how our biology, which has been sculpted by evolution over millennia, how that sort of sets the stage, and then our environment comes in and interacts with that to make us these complex beings.
Okay, so it's not nature or nurture, but it's both, and it's how they work together. Can you give me an example of how that might play out?
Yeah, absolutely. So think about how children, even at a very young age, gravitate towards certain toys, certain play styles. This book, A Mind of Her Own, talks about how these, what we call sex-typed behaviors, they emerge well before kids can even tell you what boy or girl means.
So you mean like they're drawn to like dolls or trucks before they've even been told by society what those things mean?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, studies have shown these preferences as young as 2 years old.
Wow, that's so young.
Really young. So it makes you wonder, right, if it's not solely about what they're being taught, what else is going on?
Right. Like, are some of these preferences like hardwired? It's a wild thought.
Yeah.
Speaking of hardwired, the book really dives into motherhood as like this incredibly powerful evolutionary force. And we hear that a lot, but like what makes it so significant in shaping, women's evolution?
Well, it really comes down to parental investment. So biologically speaking, women just invest more in their offspring, right?
Okay.
Pregnancy, breastfeeding,
It's a lot.
it's a lot. And it's not just, a biological reality. It has huge implications for behavior.
Right. Like what do women do because of that?
Exactly. This difference in investment, it's reverberated throughout history, shaping social structures, power dynamics,
Wow.
even like the choices that men and women make. For example, the book talks about how women across cultures tend to be much more selective when they are choosing a mate.
That's interesting.
And it's precisely because they bear the heavier burden of reproduction.
Oh, so it's not just about finding any mate. It's about finding a mate that has certain qualities
Yes,
that would make them a good parent.
100%. And the book actually delves into those specific qualities.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah, it does.
What are those?
So A Mind of Her Own talks about how women have evolved to look for partners who display signs of good health, resourcefulness, emotional intelligence,
Oh, okay.
all the things that would contribute to the survival and the well-being of their children.
Right.
Makes sense.
It does. It's like so much of what we consider typical female behavior might actually be rooted in these like deep-seated strategies to make sure your kids survive.
Exactly.
Wow. And to think that we don't even realize, like it's just evolution.
It's incredible, right? It's like this ancient wisdom.
It really is. But what about, beyond just behavior and mate selection? Like what about like female biology? The book also touches on how women's bodies have evolved to like prioritize pregnancies that are most likely to be successful.
Yeah.
How does that even work?
That's crazy, right? Like our bodies have developed these mechanisms.
Right.
So, for example, the book talks about how a woman's body might actually stop menstruating
Wow.
in environments or situations where resources are very scarce or if she's under a lot of stress.
So like athletes or dancers or something like that.
Exactly.
Who push their bodies. And it's like, this is not a good time to have a baby.
It's like an ancient biological wisdom saying like, hold on, we need to prioritize survival here.
It's amazing. The body just knows.
It really does. And speaking of survival, we can't forget about oxytocin, that powerful hormone.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That plays a role in bonding.
Okay, because I was just thinking about that. Isn't it wild how our bodies release oxytocin during childbirth and breastfeeding
Totally.
to strengthen that mother-infant bond?
Yeah.
It's like we're chemically programmed to be like, that's my baby. I love that baby.
That's amazing, right? And the book actually does a really nice job of drawing parallels between how this hormone functions in humans
Okay.
compared to other mammals.
Right.
And it's showing us that this drive to protect and nurture our offspring is really deeply ingrained in our biology.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's not just about maternal instincts.
Yeah.
A mind of her own also gets into how evolution has shaped fear and aggression in women,
Right.
which can be two sides of the same coin. Right. I mean, we've all heard that fight or flight response, but I'm guessing evolution has played a role in how men and women experience that differently.
Right. So historically, men were often in roles that required physical confrontation, right? They had to compete for resources and mates.
Okay.
Women, on the other hand, needed strategies that really prioritized their safety, their children's safety.
Right. Keep everybody safe.
Exactly. And so over time, certain differences have emerged in how we respond to threats.
Okay. So does that mean that women are just hardwired to be more fearful?
Yeah.
Because I feel like sometimes we are conditioned to be more cautious, more aware of our surroundings.
It's not necessarily that we're more fearful, but I think we react to threats in ways that would have been very beneficial for survival. So, for example, in A Mind of Her Own, they talk about a study where they showed people fear-inducing images.
Okay.
And at the same time, they played a really loud, sudden noise. They called this the potentiated startle response.
Oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, I know.
I'd be jumping out of my skin. So what happened? What did they find?
So consistently, women had a much stronger physical reaction to the images paired with that noise.
No.
They blinked harder, there was more muscle tension in their faces. And so what this suggests is that women might just have this heightened sensitivity to potential threats.
Interesting.
Like a biological early warning system, if you will.
Wow.
And that would have been crucial for keeping themselves and their babies safe.
Yeah. Like back in the day, you had to be on high alert all the time, right? I mean,
Exactly.
predators, who knows?
Right, exactly.
Wild animals, other tribes, whatever.
It's true. You had to be ready for anything.
But if we're talking about evolution and like shaping how we respond to threats, we've got to talk about aggression.
We do.
Right, because that's part of it too. So is it true that women are just naturally less aggressive?
I love this question because it's so complicated and people have such strong opinions about it.
It's true.
And A Mind of Her Own does a really nice job, I think, of diving right into it. So while physical aggression might be less common in women overall,
Right.
the book points out a very specific type of female aggression that is both fierce and frequent.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Maternal aggression.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, right. Like we've all heard those stories about mama bears protecting their cubs, right?
Oh, yeah. Don't mess with Mama Bear.
Don't do it. And, this goes beyond just anecdotes. The book uses this really powerful example of the H people in Paraguay. Anthropologists found that if a mother died within the first year of her infant's life, that child almost always died too.
Oh, wow. That is sad, but it makes sense.
Yeah, it's really highlighting just how strong, how primal that maternal protective instinct really is.
It's literally life or death.
It really is. And so the book argues that for women, aggression often emerges as this last resort. It's like this primal force that's unleashed when something threatens her children or her own survival.
So it's not that women aren't capable of aggression, but it's just expressed in different ways.
100%. And I think that's a key distinction that the book really highlights.
That is fascinating. It makes you realize just how much of who we are is shaped by these like unseen forces that have been in play for thousands, millions of years.
Yeah.
It's incredible. But it's not all about motherhood and, survival and fending off threats. What about female friendships?
Right.
Cooperation, competition, like how do those dynamics fit into the evolutionary puzzle?
Yeah, you're getting into some really juicy stuff there. A Mind of Her Own actually argues that strong female friendships provided this huge survival advantage throughout history.
I love that. Like those ride or die bonds, those run deep.
Oh, they do.
But like what makes them so crucial from an evolutionary standpoint?
Well, imagine like life for women hundreds, thousands of years ago.
Right.
Friendships offered this crucial layer of protection.
Okay.
Not just against like external threats,
Right.
but even the book points out like potential aggression from men within their own community.
So it's like safety in numbers, like you've got to have your girl.
100%, like a united front.
Yes. And I bet those friendships also involved a whole lot of childcare.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The book talks about this concept called allomothering,
Okay.
which basically means like shared caregiving within a community.
It takes a village.
It really does.
Right.
These strong social bond would have been so crucial for women raising children, especially during tough times when resources were scarce.
Totally. It's amazing to think about how, like, those deep-seated instincts to connect and support each other might still be there.
Right.
Even today. Like,
Totally.
we're still doing it. But, okay, let's get real for a second. It's not all, like, sunshine and communal childcare with women.
Right.
What about competition?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it would be naive to think that competition doesn't exist.
Right.
But A Mind of Her Own argues that female competition often looks a little different than the kind of head-to-head battles that we see more often with men.
So less about, like, physical brawls for a mate.
Yeah.
And more about, like, strategic maneuvering.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Like, think gossip,
Ooh.
social exclusion,
Ew.
subtle ways of, like, undermining a rival's reputation.
Right.
The book called this indirect aggression.
Oh, that's a good term for it. Yeah, indirect aggression. Not going to lie, that tracks with some of my middle school experience.
Right.
But why is that so effective? Like,
Yeah.
it seems kind of, I don't know, roundabout.
Well, for one thing, it's often a lot less risky than physical confrontation.
Right. Less likely to get hurt.
Exactly. Which can be dangerous, especially for women. But it's also incredibly effective at damaging a rival's social standing.
Okay.
And as we've already talked about, social standing is everything.
It's huge.
Right. Especially when we're talking about mate selection.
Because if you can, like, subtly make someone look bad,
Yes.
then it's like, ooh, maybe not her. Maybe pick me.
Exactly. It's like you're increasing your own chances
Right.
of attracting a high-quality mate.
It's the long game.
100%. It really is. And, you know, while these tactics might seem a little,
Shady.
yeah, a little shady, a little bit less than admirable.
Right.
In the modern world, the book suggests that they were honed over generations, becoming part of this complex repertoire of behaviors
Right.
that females evolved
Okay.
to secure resources and ensure the survival of their offspring.
It's like this whole hidden world of competition that we might not even be aware of.
It's fascinating.
It really is. But shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that really struck me in A Mind of Her Own was this discussion about, you know, genes versus environment.
Yeah.
It's not just nature or nurture, right? It's like way more complicated than that.
The book makes it very clear that our genes and our environment are constantly in this conversation,
Right.
shaping who we are and how we behave.
So it's like this dance, this interplay between our biology and, like, the world around us. How does that actually work? Like, can you give me an example, like, in childhood development? Like, how does that play out?
Well, so imagine a child who's genetically predisposed to be, let's say, impulsive and active.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let's picture that child growing up in a really structured environment,
Okay.
really supportive, with clear boundaries, consistent
An
discipline.
environment that, like, gives them a framework for all that big energy they have.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. So what happens?
So in this case, that child's natural impulsivity might actually come out as them excelling at sports, being a real leader.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe even like thriving in a really fast-paced job later in life.
Wow. Okay, so it's like the same traits can manifest in different ways.
Exactly. But now let's take that same child,
Okay.
same genes,
Uh-huh.
but now we're going to put them in a chaotic environment.
Okay.
Very little structure, not a lot of support.
Okay, so, like, the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. So now those same impulses, that same energy
Okay.
might actually lead to behavioral problems. Maybe they have trouble in school,
Yeah.
maybe even some run-ins with the law. So same genes.
Wow.
Very different outcomes.
Right. Based on the environment. It's like the environment can make all the difference.
It really can. And I think this really highlights the incredible complexity of human development.
Yeah, it's not simple.
It's not as simple as, you know, oh, this gene equals this behavior, right? It's really about understanding that interplay.
Right. We've got to look at the whole picture. So we've got, like, these biological things, we've got the environment, but then there's also culture, right?
There's absolutely
Like, that has to play a huge role in shaping, you know, especially the female experience. Does the book talk about that at all?
It does. A Mind of Her Own argues that culture is like this really powerful lens, and it shapes how our evolved tendencies actually show up in the real world.
Yeah.
It influences everything, who we're attracted to, how we express our emotions, the kinds of parents that we become.
Wow. So it's like culture really adds another layer of nuance to this already very complex thing.
It does.
Can you give me an example of how that might look? Like how culture and evolution like bump up against each other?
Yeah, totally. So let's think about physical attractiveness.
Okay.
So across cultures, there tends to be this preference for symmetrical faces and bodies.
Okay.
Right, we kind of touched on that earlier.
Right, because it signals like good health,
Yeah.
good genes, all that.
Exactly. But what's considered attractive beyond those really basic markers can vary a lot depending on the culture.
Okay, so it's like the basics are the same.
Yeah,
But then every culture's like, we'll take it from here.
exactly. So let's take body size as an example.
Okay.
So in some cultures, a fuller figure is considered incredibly attractive. It can symbolize health, prosperity.
I'm thinking about like those old paintings, like the Rubenesque women.
Yes, exactly.
Like those were the beauty standards back then.
Exactly. But then in other cultures, thinness is the ideal.
Right. Totally different.
And that's associated with youthfulness, self-discipline,
Right. Completely different things.
even social status.
And those ideals are everywhere.
They are.
Like magazines, movies, social media.
It's true. You can't escape it.
Yeah, it's tough.
It really is.
I-
So we might all be hardwired to appreciate certain things, but then culture comes in and adds its own spin on it.
Right. It's like this extra filter on top of everything.
And that really is. And that shapes our perceptions of beauty.
That's fascinating. So we've got like biology over here, we've got culture over here, and it makes you wonder like what happens when they clash,
Oh, that's a great question.
right? Like when they're not on the same page.
And that's something the book really dives into, what happens when our culture is telling us one thing,
Yeah.
but like our biology is kind of like pulling us in a different direction.
Oh, okay. I needed an example. This sounds juicy.
Okay, let's think about motherhood again.
Okay.
From an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah.
That drive to have children, to care for our young, it's very powerful.
Oh, incredibly powerful. And we talked about like all those biological mechanisms
Yes.
that are in place to support pregnancy and like bonding and caring for our kids.
It's amazing.
Like a whole symphony going on in there.
I know, it's incredible. But, in many cultures today, there's a lot of pressure on women to balance motherhood with a career.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The have-it-all dilemma.
Exactly.
It's real.
It's real. And those expectations might lead some women to wait to have kids or not have children at all,
Yeah.
which on the surface seems to go against this deep-seated biological instinct.
Right. Like nature's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. And the book kind of gets into, like, how do we navigate that,
It's
right?
almost like a tug of war
It is.
between nature and like the demands of modern society.
It's this delicate balancing act. And A Mind of Her Own reminds us there's no right answer.
Right.
It's really about understanding how complex this all is,
Yeah.
recognizing all the different factors, and
Right.
ultimately just making choices that feel right for us.
Yeah. It's about like empowerment and not judgment.
Right.
100% you do what you got to do.
Yes.
It's your life. Okay, so we've got this fascinating mix of biology, environment, culture. It's like shaping who we are. But what about individual differences?
Right.
Because even with all of that, thank goodness we're not all carbon copies of each other.
Thank goodness. It's true. We're not all like cookie cutter women, thankfully. And the book actually goes into this. It says even with these, underlying biological predispositions,
Right.
there's still so much room for variation
Hmm.
from one woman to the next. We're not all working off the same blueprint. It's not like evolution was like, here's the one-size-fits-all model of womanhood. We're done here.
Right.
It's way more nuanced than that.
Yeah, it's not that simple.
Not at all. It's like evolution gives us the ingredients, right? But then each of us, based on our unique genes, our environment, our experiences,
Right.
it's up to us to bake the cake.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's like we all have the potential to be different
Exactly.
right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And A Mind of Her Own, they talk about how even random mutations, those little quirks in our DNA.
Yeah. They introduce all this variation into the gene pool.
Right. It's like mixing things up.
Yeah, it's like evolution is constantly experimenting, adding new flavors to the mix,
I love it. It's like evolution is a mad scientist. So we've got all this diversity, and then culture comes in.
Right, culture comes
Well,
in.
we've talked about how that shapes like what we find attractive.
Yeah.
But it's got to be about more than just that, right?
Yeah.
Like how else does culture influence how those like individual differences actually play out in our lives?
Oh, it's huge. Culture's so powerful. It shapes our behaviors, our relationships, our sense of self. Like, let's take risk-taking as an example,
Okay.
right? We always hear that men are the risk-taker.
Right. They're always jumping out of airplanes and stuff.
Exactly. And while there might be some biological reason for that, culture also plays a huge role in either encouraging that
Right.
or pushing back against it.
So, like, a woman who's raised in a culture that's like, go for it,
Yeah.
be independent, be ambitious, she might be more likely to take risks, even if, like, deep down, her biology is like, I don't know about this.
Exactly. Or think about like how different cultures view emotions.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Right. So some cultures, it's really normal and healthy for everyone to be open about their feelings.
Okay.
But then other cultures, it's like, nope, emotions are meant to be kept in check, especially for women.
Interesting. So it's like, even if biologically we might be wired to be more emotionally expressive,
Yeah.
culture can, like, say, nope, dial it back a bit.
Exactly. It's like these cultural scripts are always running in the background,
Wow.
influencing how we experience and express our emotions.
That's wild. It's like culture's always there, even if we don't realize it.
Totally. It's like the air we breathe. We don't even think about it, but
Wow.
it's shaping us nonetheless.
It really is. But it makes you wonder, with all
Yeah.
these, like, cultural shifts that have happened, especially, like, in recent decades, like, how does that impact these deep-seated evolutionary tendencies we've been talking about?
It's a great question.
Right. I mean, think about it. We've had the women's liberation movement,
Hmm?
the sexual revolution.
Right.
Like, the role of women in society has changed so drastically.
Hugely. And that's something, thankfully, A Mind of Her Own doesn't shy away from.
Oh, good.
It acknowledges that these movements, they've had a huge impact on women,
Yeah.
like challenging those traditional gender roles, opening up opportunities that just weren't there before.
A whole new world.
Oh, yeah.
Greater access to education, careers, reproductive rights. Like, it's amazing how much has changed in such a short amount of time.
I know, it's mind-blowing. But as the book points out, these changes, as amazing as they are,
Yeah.
they've also come with their own set of complexities.
Okay. Because it can't all be perfect, right? Like, what kind of complexities? Spill the tea.
Well, let's think about the sexual revolution for a second.
Okay.
On the one hand, it was this incredibly liberating time for women.
Right. Like, breaking free from all these old rules.
Exactly. Reclaiming their bodies, their choices.
Yeah.
It was really incredible. But as the book also points out, this newfound freedom, it didn't come without some, let's say, unintended consequences.
Okay, like what?
Well, for one, it created this new kind of pressure for women.
Oh, interesting.
Like this sense that, okay, now I have to be sexually liberated even if I'm not really feeling it. Oh, wow. It's like the pendulum swung from one extreme to the other.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And the book talks about how, in some ways, this made women more vulnerable to being taken advantage of.
Yeah. It's like with more freedom comes more responsibility.
Exactly. And that's kind of a theme with a lot of the changes that have happened.
Okay.
Right? Take, for example, more women in the workforce.
Right.
Which is amazing. Women should have equal opportunities
100%.
to have careers and be financially independent.
Yes.
But this shift has also kind of blurred those traditional gender roles.
Okay.
And, that can lead to a whole other set of stresses for everyone involved.
It's like we're all trying to figure it out as we go.
We are. And it's messy and it's complicated, but it's also really exciting.
It really is. It's like we're in uncharted territory. Exactly. And A Mind of Her Own really encourages us to embrace that,
Okay.
to understand that there's no one right way to do this whole being a woman thing.
I love that.
It's about finding what works for each of us.
Yeah. So more about having honest conversations,
Yes.
asking questions,
Yeah.
figuring out, okay, what works for me in this crazy modern world.
100%. And recognizing that our understanding of this whole thing,
Right.
it's going to keep evolving
Yeah.
as we learn more about ourselves, about our biology, our culture.
Yeah, it's a journey, right? It's not like we just arrive at the destination and we're done.
It's a lifelong process. And I think that's what I appreciate so much about this book, A Mind of Her Own.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from the tough questions.
Right.
And it doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
It's refreshing. Because who has all the answers, really?
Right. I mean, seriously. But, what it does do is it gives us this invitation to keep exploring what it means to be a woman in all our messy, imperfect glory.
It's celebrating the complexity. I love it. And I think that's honestly like the best takeaway from this whole conversation. It was like, A Mind of Her Own isn't about putting women in a box or saying, like, this is how you should be.
Right.
It's more about saying, here's some information, here's some things to think about, Now go out and be your own amazing self.
100%. And I think that's ultimately the book's greatest strength. You
Yes.
know, it really celebrates the strength of women, the resilience, the adaptability.
Yes. It's recognizing that we're not just products of our past, but we can also shape our future, you know? And it's
Yeah.
acknowledging that women have always been like these incredible forces of nature
Yeah,
shaping the world around them.
totally.
It's been so great diving into this topic.
I've loved chatting about it with you, and I hope our listeners will check out A Mind of Her Own and, dive into these ideas themselves.
Yes. Keep the conversation going.
Good, yeah.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. What seemingly typical female behavior today might actually be rooted in our evolutionary past. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep embracing the power of your own incredible mind. Until next time.